Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon also to our participants online. My name is Juana Sotomayor, and I am the UN Human Rights Advisor to the Resident Coordinator Office here in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, and I will be your host this afternoon. We welcome you to the commemoration of Human Rights Day 2022. Today's panel discussion will address the topic of inclusion for fairer societies for present and future generations. The panel is organized by the UN system in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean in partnership with the Minister of Labor, Social Security, and the Third Sector in Barbados, Honourable Colin Jordan. We have an excellent group of panelists representing different institutions and organizations in Barbados, and also we have a panelist joining us from Dominica. I want to mention that this is going to be recorded. It's a live streaming, and we will also be recording sign language for future reference. Before we start, if I may ask those of you who are in the room to please silence your phones or keep them in vibration so that we don't disturb the meeting. And for those of you following us online, please start sending questions or comments via Zoom for the panelists or for in general about this event. We will have you muted unless anyone is going to take the floor in the final part. And this is the best reminder always. So we are going to start with a slight amendment to the agenda. We will start with opening statements by the UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Didier Trébouc. But we're not going to have the Minister of we are not going to have the Minister of Labor, Social Security at this moment. He will be joining us later. So with this, I give the floor to the UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Didier Trébouc.
Good afternoon. So I have the opportunity to greet in person Minister Colin Jordan. So he'll be joining us in a few minutes and perhaps deliver his remarks after the panel. But in the interest of time, we decided to start. So I want to thank again all the participants joining us here in person. I see Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director of CIDIMA, members of civil society, representative of various embassies and development partners, Ambassador of Argentina, UK High Commission, amongst many others, European delegation. My UN colleagues, of course, and members of the civil society organization and panelists whom we really look forward to listen and hear from today, as well as our online audience joining us for this event. So, of course, it's my pleasure and honor to co-host on behalf of the UN team for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, co-host this event with Minister of Labor, Social Security and Third Sector today. This is our commemoration of the Human Rights Day 2022, which was celebrated on last Saturday, 10th of December, as you know. Really, I want to welcome you all to this conversation because this is an issue that is really central to our work as United Nations, but also all your work that you do, meaning inclusion for fairer societies. And today, basically, we aim to listen to a conversation amongst various voices, perspectives, and generation. So I'm glad to say that during the past year at the United Nations here in the Eastern Caribbean, we have contributed with governments and other stakeholders in several areas that directly related to human rights from support to strengthening of the social protection system, addressing the needs for more resilient and sustainable food system, and providing support to the development of legislations, and providing also support for development on policies on women, persons with disabilities, children or youth, amongst others. And in 2022, the UN system has also assisted government and civil society to engage with a very important milestone in the UN system, which are the Universal Periodic Review for Antigua and Barbuda and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis this year, marked also an important step with the presentation of a combined report last week, actually, to the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. So there has been also important progress that I want to highlight here in legislation, or this is currently being worked out in Barbados as it relates to child care, child protection, elderly protection. And I believe that the government of Barbados should be commended for such important progresses as the country is preparing as well for the Universal Periodic Review at the Human Rights Council in early 2023. But we also that human rights challenges continue to emerge. As we have seen in the last month or years during the COVID pandemic, but in the last month with the impact of the triple crisis on food, fuel, and finance. And in those cases, I believe our role as United Nations, civil society, partners, government, is very important to support the responses and shed also the light on the risk that population left behind can experience or have experienced already as a result of the cumulative impact of crisis, not to mention climate change, which always strike, most importantly, the most vulnerable. So we are really glad to focus today the conversation on inclusion. It's a recognition that human rights have advanced thanks to increased participation, accessibility, and opportunities for diverse people and communities. And as part of our celebration of Human Rights Day this year, we have also launched the hashtag #MoreThan campaign, giving voice to people around the region. And each person, for example, Roxanne, Abel, Anthony, Jean-Luc, Nadina, so far, have brought unexpected and unique angles to this discussion, highlighting the various hats each of us, in a way, wears and how they are, in their cases, contributing to a more inclusive society. In a way, we are all more than our profession or function in society, and our participation in cultural life, in communities, associations, schools, in the present and the future that we jointly construct, all enrich the whole. So in this regard, we, of course, welcome, but not only welcome, encourage the diverse views and perspectives expressed during this campaign and to be expressed in the months to come. We'll also listen with attention to this evening's panel discussion that will commence very shortly. In a way, as United Nations, as you know, we are very committed to ensuring that our work makes a difference in the exercise of all human rights by women and men of all ages, and notably those who are at risk of being marginalized. And while we have taken very positive steps to create a space, for example, for the voice of youth, with the creation of a youth advisory group, or with women through different reference groups with civil society that have been created under different initiatives, we also recognize that there is still more to be done. And moving forward in 2023, we are definitely determined to further our work, for example, with persons with disabilities, with migrant or refugees, the elderly, or LGBTQI people. So in closing, I want to mark the start of a year-long campaign to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 2023. let's not forget also that the Sustainable Development Goals are a right-based agenda. This is how it was conceptualized in 2015. So anticipate in a way that the inspiration of one of the most powerful documents in history can also foster accelerated progress towards the attainment of the global goals. So I again wish to echo the sentiment in closing of our UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who said on Saturday, on this Human Rights Day, we reaffirm the universality and indivisibility of our rights, and we stand up for human rights for all. So I thank you again for your participation and for standing up with us for human rights for all. I see that we have other colleagues and partners who have joined us, the High Commission of Canada, PAHO WHO, or UN Women, amongst others. So thank you for being with us, and looking forward to a very rich, I'm sure, discussion with our panelist members, and very soon with Minister Colin Jordan will join us and deliver remarks after the panel. Thank you.
Meantime, I would like to invite the moderator and panelists to join us here in the stage, please. Mrs. Nicole Foster will be moderating the session today. And as panelists, we have Ms. Kerry-Ann Ilfield. Mr. Ferguson Balmont is joining us online. We have Mrs. Marilyn Rice-Bowen and Mr. Michael Rapley, or Ripley. Sorry if I don't know. Rapley was fine. Okay. Can we get confirmation of the sound, please? Upstairs, 1, 2 steps, and then to the right. Yeah. And then here you can see it. The sound is not working? Please, I see the Minister, Colin Jordan, has joined us. Good afternoon, Minister. Would you like to? Please. Then the Minister Jordan will speak to us now. Thank you, Minister. 1 second, we are checking the sound with Zoom. 1 moment. Is it clear? Is the sound okay?
Resident Coordinator, all is well? Okay, thank you. Resident Coordinator, other officials from the United Nations system, panelists, ambassadors, excellencies, all public officers, particularly those from my ministry, partners and friends, good evening to everyone. Allow me first to apologize for my lateness. I attended the funeral for the former Roman Catholic Archbishop of the Barbados Diocese. The president was in attendance. And when the president is in attendance, ministers are not allowed to leave before the president leaves. Otherwise, I would have slipped out. But I would have been in breach of protocol. So I was very torn between having to cause a delay in this activity and respecting the protocol. If I had been assured that dismissal from the cabinet would have allowed me to find employment with the United Nations system, I would have left, but Mr. Tribute did not, in his response to me, did not give that assurance. So I stayed. When I get that assurance, I'll breach any other protocol coming after that. It is my, next time, it is my privilege, though, to be part of this celebration for Human Rights Day. I think it is important that we recognize days such as these and that they not become just other days that we commemorate. We do something to say that we've ticked the box. I'm happy to have been asked by the United Nations system in Barbados, the organization in Barbados, and the resident coordinator to be co-host of today's activity and today's commemoration. Human Rights Day, and while the name may make what I'm about to say obvious, I think it is important for us to remember that we are talking first and foremost about human beings. I say that because my lived experience does not suggest that everybody recognizes that we are all human beings. It is unfortunate, but it is a reality, and I think it is a reality we ought to face. And that is why on days like, well, Saturday was Human Rights Day, but we're commemorating today. And on days like Saturday and commemoration today, we ought to reinforce that we're talking about the rights of people, people just like us, people who may look different, sound different, and in my case, maybe not as tall as I am, and I'm just using I can pick on myself, but people who may be different or who may appear to be different, but who are connected because of our fundamental humanity. And that is something that we ought not to lose sight of. We are all human beings. As a person of African descent, I am particularly interested in and concerned about a day like the day that we celebrate today, that we commemorate today. People of African descent have suffered over 400 years, or almost 400 years, around and about 400 years, of an attempt, a systematic attempt to dehumanize. And so persons like myself who feel strongly about our heritage must be in the vanguard of celebrating a day like Human Rights Day, a day that recognizes that all of us are human beings and so share a fundamental equality. In my constituency, we've started working with the Center for Hybrid Studies, a program, a celebration called the Spitestone Global Freedom Festival. And one of the reasons we started that was because we recognize that there has always been a struggle for equality, a struggle to determine one's destiny and not to have that destiny dictated to us. And that goes for nations, but it also goes for people. It goes for all of us. We want to have the freedom to express ourselves. We want to have the freedom, and I'm saying we want to. We must have the freedom to express ourselves within the context of the public good. We must have the freedom to be able to share our perspectives with others. And so we celebrated in that Spitestone Global Freedom Festival. We started, it came out of a lecture that was delivered by Professor Sir Hilary Beckles called From Coffee to Owen. Now, we traced a journey of individuals, people, human beings, in a struggle for self-determination, to be able to express. And Kofi, in 1675, who was to be crowned King of Barbados in Spitestone, that struggle, he was Ghanaian-born, the feeling, that deep desire to be able to express and not to be taken advantage of by others. And we traced the struggle through to former Prime Minister, Professor the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, who, in a speech in Trinidad, in response to the American attempt to have shipwriter enforced in the Caribbean, used the phrase Massa Day Done. And Massa Day Done, while expressed on behalf of a country, really comes out of a human being response. Massa Day Done in terms of those who are subjected to attempts at dehumanization. And so the Universal Declaration of Human Rights really ought to be the foundation upon which we build. It expresses well, and I go to the preamble of the Declaration. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in this world. And then we know, many of us know either the words or the essence of Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood, crafted obviously when men dominated the world. The world has changed. But we understand what the Declaration speaks to. And this evening I'm happy to be here with my Deputy Permanent Secretary, my Chief Labor Officer, and I saw my coordinator. I thought, oh yes, from the Ministry of Labor, Social Security and the Third Sector. We're happy to be a part of this celebration, coordinator and others gathered. We look forward to rich discussion, and I promise that since I was late, I wouldn't talk too long. I have to redeem the time, as we say. Thank you for inviting us to be a part of this. It is my honor to be co-host, and I look forward to us continuing to build the sense among our people and among all people that we are all human beings, we are part of the human family, and we deserve respect, and we deserve to be able to express ourselves as we consider fit within the context of good order in our countries. Thank you very much.
So with this, I give the floor to Nicole, to Dr. Nicole Foster, who will be leading us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello? Yes? Okay. So thank you, Juana. And it's my absolute pleasure to be here moderating today's commemorative panel discussion. I'm going to jump straight into it with a brief introduction of our panelists. So I have with me, well, I should mention, I'm Nicole Foster. I am a law lecturer, attorney at law by training, a public international lawyer, and I head the Law and Health Research Unit at the K-Phil Law Faculty. I have here on my left is someone who is no stranger to anyone in Barbados, Carrie-Anne Eiffel. She is a disability rights advocate and a trailblazer in that space within the region. She was the first blind person to graduate from the University of the West Indies with a degree in sociology and psychology. Many of us know Ms. Eiffel as a former president of the Senate of Barbados, and she currently serves as president of the Barbados Council for the Disabled. And she also is a member of the Constitutional Reform Commission that Barbados has established, and a consultant on rights for persons with disabilities. Then I have on my immediate right, Marilyn Rice-Bowen. She is a long-standing member, another face that is well known in Barbados, a long-standing member of BARP, and elected a director in 2017, and she has been its president since 2019. She is a Justice of Peace. She was awarded the Barbados Silver Star in 2013 for meritorious community service. Her background is that of financial advisor. She's a retired financial advisor and has been a staunch advocate for social justice for over 4 decades. Among her many activities and engagements in civil society, she's a former president of the National Organization of Women and the Caribbean Women's Association, and she's worked extensively on women's rights. And in her capacity as BARP president, she has intensified her advocacy as she heightens awareness of elder abuse and its devastating impact on society. And on my far right, I have Mr. Michael Rapley. He is an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community for the past 10 years. He's founder and current chair of Equals, which is an organization that is focused on ensuring safe and stigma-free access to services and the creation of safe spaces for the LGBTQ plus community. He has assisted in the implementation of the first community site to offer PrEP in the Caribbean. He's also advocated in terms of sexual orientation, inclusion within the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act, and he does a lot of sensitization work, including with our Ministry of Health and Ministry of Labor and Social Partnerships. He has also co-designed the Caribbean Inclusion and Diversity Training Manual, which is used throughout the Caribbean as a tool for sensitization training. So you see, we have a good sense, a good range of very much reflecting the theme of the panel. We have a range of persons with different backgrounds who are very much more than any one thing. Who are very much more than any one thing. And so I'm going to just start. How we're going to proceed is we're going to have a little bit of. Oh. We have one more panelist online, whose bio I don't have here. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm half blind, clearly. Ferdinand Valmont, my apologies. Ferdinand Valmont from Dominica. He is with us online. He is an active youth leader and president of the Kalingo Inspirators Youth Group. There he is. Welcome. From an early age, he has represented his country at the Youth Climate Change Summit and participated in the launching of the OECS YACI News platform. He is a member of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, a country coordinator for the Global Youth Parliament, and a member of the United Nations Youth Advisory Group for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. He believes that adequate youth representation is needed to ensure that we have a voice on the national, regional, and international stage. So with that, as I said, you see that we have a quite wide range of persons and backgrounds, very much reflecting our theme of more than, and how we are going to proceed is to have a bit of a conversation. And so I'm going to throw some questions at our different panelists and give them an opportunity to provide their perspectives on these issues. So the first question that I wanted to start off with, and maybe I'll start on my left with Ms. Eiffel. What do we mean by inclusion? From your perspective, what does inclusion mean for you?
Good evening, everyone. And first, let me thank the team from UN for inviting me to be part of this panel to discuss human rights. What do we mean by inclusion? You know, inclusion, so many of us think we know what that means. We think, right, once I have a person representing all these diverse groups, I'm inclusive, but it's not. Inclusion is when you invite me to the party and you invite me to dance. It is not merely having a conversation and ticking off the boxes. It's encouraging participation. It's encouraging persons from a diverse background to share their views, ensuring that facilities are in place, that all persons, whether they are persons with disabilities, persons living with any non-communicable diseases, persons from the elder community, persons from any diverse sector of the community, that their voices are heard and given equal weight and value. Now, to do that means a variety of different opportunities have to be explored. We have to accept first the reality that our world is not equal. Our world is not designed to be inclusive. And so it takes effort on the part of those of us who are working in this field and the part of those who offer services and programs across the region to make it inclusive. And to do so, I throw to you a theme that is loud and proud within the UN system. Nothing about us without us. That is the catchphrase used by persons with disabilities. And that has to extend to all diverse sectors within our community. If you want to include us, you must do so by ensuring that we are part of the discussion, that our needs are taken into consideration, and more importantly, that our opinions are valued.
Thank you. I think two very powerful points that you made there. Don't just invite me to the party, invite me to dance as well. That I will definitely be using that one in my international human rights class. And then the idea that a conscious and deliberate decision has to be made about inclusion. It doesn't happen by chance. So Marvin, picking up from where Ms. Eiffel left off, what's inclusion for you?
Okay, thank you, and thank you. All protocol observed. For me, as a senior, and I'm a senior, okay? For me, as a senior, like Kerry used the analogy of being invited to the dance, but I will use another one, being invited to sit at the table. But not to be just there at the table, but to listen to my views, give us the opportunity to express our opinions, and to get the feeling that you are included, so that, you know, sometimes you have persons at a table, at a meeting, and sometimes they don't get the opportunity to speak, or sometimes people deliberately drown them out. You know, you have somebody, you say, oh, I have a point there, I have a point, I have a point. But if you have invited me to the table, as seniors, we want to have the opportunity. We want you to listen to us as well, and recognize that we are operating in a space where we are operating in a space that we are sharing. So, and we like to think of the intergenerational mix, because we are stronger when we recognize that we are not here as seniors standing in a vacuum, but we can build a stronger community when we recognize the power of the intergenerational mix.
Okay, thank you. And that's another sort of important additional dimension, that question of the intergenerational perspective. And so turning now to you, Michael, what is inclusion for you based on your work and the hat that you're wearing?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you also for having me here today. What could I really add that, you know, my colleagues haven't? But I think that we think that including minority groups just benefits them. But it actually benefits, you know, the wider society and the wider community. So, for example, up until June this year, the blood bank actually had a question on, you know, if you had anal sex within the last few years, and they would reject you for giving blood, even though they always tested blood. Fortunately, I can say that question, that protocol has been removed since June. And, you know, the benefit for this, because I had quite a number of community members call me up personally to say that they wanted to give blood, they were trying to give blood to their loved ones, and they couldn't do so because they were rejected. And then those, you know, their loved ones miss out on this opportunity to receive the treatment and care that they need. And, you know, the blood bank, we know, is always lacking for blood and always asking for blood. So you're isolating a subpopulation who wants to contribute to society, obviously not just in this aspect, but in every aspect of society. And, you know, you have a protocol that doesn't make sense medically. There's no backing behind it. And so we can see how inclusion in that regard can benefit the wider society. And then, of course, you know, there have been many studies recently on how impactful inclusion and diversity in the workplace can be. And just by having a diverse workplace improves productivity, because there are more persons willing to engage, because they feel like they can be open about, you know, their opinions and their input is valued, but also because they're not suffering from having to hide who they really are, which comes with its own mental health problems like anxiety and depression, which, as we all know, can impact our productivity. So being inclusive isn't just about the minority groups, it's about the wider society.
Really excellent point. And let me turn now to Ferdis, and you're going to have the last say on this question of, from your perspective as a youth advocate and someone working particularly in the space of climate change, which we know is the hot topic these days. What does inclusion mean for you? What is important to you to share with others in terms of understanding that concept of inclusion?
Good evening, everyone. With protocols.
Okay, Ferdinand, I think you're stuck, so we're just gonna see, I imagine we're gonna try and see.
As a process, individuals who are marginalized or blocked from the various resources present to really have access to it so that they can really display full potential in society. Of course, we all know that when they're allowed to show their full potential, then the productivity, like my fellow panelists stated, will be much better. But first, I believe in order to, let's say, achieve inclusiveness, we have to create a society in which we allow these voices of individuals and groups to be heard and their needs, not only some separated or putting them in various groups, but all making sure that they have a stake or they have an opinion in that. And of course, we all know that when this inclusiveness is accomplished, then we all know stability will be maintained and the change that is needed for everyone to embrace it when it is called for. And we all see that, especially climate change, especially for the indigenous community, we see that not much resources being given to help fight or combat the various impacts. But being included in the various means or included in society as a whole, we'll see, much more focus is being placed there as really looked at resiliency in that aspect of being included into society in general.
Okay, thank you. So important point there about how inclusiveness can also raise the profile of the given issues and sort of help stimulate increased activity. So I wanted to pick up on the point that the discussion that Michael kind of started there, a side discussion about, so we understand, we've said what we understand inclusion to be about and what it is not. What are the benefits, do you say? So Michael started talking about, we tend to think, oh, it's just the minority group. But I wanted us to maybe dig a little bit deeper and flesh out a little bit more what we saw as some of the benefits of having inclusive societies. How was that important for human rights? How is that important for our societies as a whole? Carrie Ann?
For me, that's an extremely important discussion, because if you are talking about what can it do for your society, I always think about children. And children don't see disabilities. They don't see differences. Children just play, right? Older persons, they're all grannies and granddaddies. The children, you just have a different look to you. They don't know what LGBTQ is. They don't know what the big difference is. Why doesn't want somebody, they don't understand those things. It's us that are the adults that start making differences mean something.
Yeah.
So for me, the value of inclusion is teaching people to accept and respect that everybody has a change. Because in our Caribbean, we have not only the minority groups, but let's not forget, we have the questions of race and ethnicity. And too often, those still, unfortunately, seem to be of importance to some. Where you came from, who you know, those kinds of things. All of those are barriers to proper human rights. And so when we are talking about people embracing their human rights, people not having their human rights violated, it starts when people recognize that, yes, I can sit down to table with, I can go to parties with, I can coexist and work with persons from a diverse background. It means that when others, if I, as a person with a disability, goes to do business with Michael, and I walk into his office, and there is a person with a disability working there, I begin to feel welcomed. if I go to BARP, which I had the privilege to do earlier this year, and explore their recently renovated building and see all of the inclusive aspects that they have designed into their services, I feel welcomed. But when I go to another space and it doesn't have those things, and people talk to the person who's entered the room with me, or someone else is having a discussion about what she needs as though I can't hear, or they're having a discussion about the older gentleman and they're saying that he can't get this access to this service because we don't give it to people of a certain age. And you can't define what that certain age is. You just look at him and see a little bit too much of the snow on the mountain, so you figure nothing ain't going on. They ain't got no fire in the oven, you know? But my point is, the value to our society, when we are able to look around, when we are able to understand that our rights are understood, and that, yes, through ignorance you may not understand that I can, but when it's exposed to you, and when you get a value, when you're exposed to the training, because it doesn't come by osmosis. That's what I keep telling people. You don't just pick it up by standing up outside. You pick it up by effort, by training, by working with, and that is the value of inclusion.
Okay, so Marlon, I wanted you now to address it from the perspective of that very interesting idea that you introduced of that intergenerational dimension.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And what I want to also state here is that it eliminates discrimination as well. And when we are thinking about intergenerational, permit me to share an example. This is a practical example. In Barbados, in October of this year, I may have to refer to my notes, but this is very practical. In Barbados, in October of this year, you will recall that the under 25s, the heavy-duty licenses were suspended in October of 2021, okay?
2022.
Sorry, 2020, that, I don't have senior moments, I just forgot. Okay, so that's in October 2022. This is the young people, under 25s. And because we heard buzzwords around about loss of opportunity, employment opportunity, and the young people were texting the different government officials, by December 6, 2022, the amendment to the Road Traffic Act has went to Parliament, and the current minister is hoping that it goes through the Senate quickly. Now, these are the under 25s, okay? The heavy-duty licenses. So the road has been paved for them. Let's look at a similar situation to seniors. In October 2021, under the heading reported in one of our daily papers, renewing licenses to be made easier for seniors, the then minister reported that one of the major changes he would seek to make was to remove the age discrimination barrier for seniors, all right? And he further stated that he already had cabinet approval and all of that. I'm going to preface this by stating that today, December 12, 2022, absolutely no traction has been made for the seniors in this country. And the buzzwords for us would be trailblazers, nation builders, all right? And equally important, human rights approach. But everything we are more or less now being relegated to the silent segment of the society. And that is why it's important to have sessions like this, to draw attention to what's the practical situations that are occurring, and for persons to understand that, yes, Kerry, you said it, like Kerry's division, we too have rights. And our rights should not be trampled at any point in time. So from where we see it as a discrimination of seniors. So back to inclusion, if when at the end of this exercise, in another 2 months, 3 months, we could see some movement for the seniors in this country, we could say, yes, this panel discussion has been a success. But we need to be included. And we don't only want to be included on paper, we want to feel a part of the whole.
Okay, and Ferguson, I'm going to jump over to you. You're the youth voice here on the panel, but recognizing very much that we wear multiple hats, so I'm not in any way stereotyping you in that space. What about your views on this issue? What do you see as a young person, the concrete benefits that come from your inclusion, from nothing for you without you? Oh, he dropped off. Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, no problem. We'll pick back up with him once we're able to get him back on. So just moving smartly along then. So we have a sense of what inclusion...
Sorry, do you mind if I add something?
Yes, of course.
So I think the importance of inclusion as well is not just, so, you know, we're sort of talking about the issues a little bit that affect like the communities we represent, but I think that we need to notice that some of the things that we're calling for to be inclusive impact not just, you know, other persons of other minority groups, but the general population as well. So, for example, there are some afflictions that elderly persons do have in common with persons with disabilities because they develop, you know, lack of sight, lack of hearing, mobility issues. So some of the things that are implemented that might be pushed by the persons with the disability community do impact, you know, other communities as well. And when we talk about freedom of expression for the LGBT community, that can impact the general population in terms of how they express themselves, because sometimes we want to exclude certain levels of expression that general population might also feel comfortable expressing themselves that way, like how you hold your hair or how you dress, you know, things like that people are comfortable with that might seem outlandish to some, but, you know, for perhaps persons who are gender non-conforming, that's how they want to dress. But then there's also people that don't identify as gender non-conforming that, you know, want to dress that way as well because, you know, that's just how they're comfortable dressing. So I think the importance of inclusion is that, again, coming back to my point of how it impacts the wider society as well, and not just the group that's perhaps advocating for the rights. I think that's perhaps something we should look at is how does this actually impact the wider community, or how does this impact another minority group positively?
Yeah. No, very much. I mean, sort of wearing my sort of educator hat. I mean, one of the things that we are often sensitized to is something called universal design in education, with the idea being that, you know, when you structure a course and stuff like that, and you're building in like stuff to take account for persons with hearing issues or sight issues, etc., that can also benefit other persons within the class as well, because you don't know how people learn, etc. So you're thinking you're doing it for that one person in the classroom who can't see well, or, you know, who can't hear well or whatever, but in fact, the impact can be much, much greater. Or you may have someone who, you know, you've created a ramp for people with wheelchairs, but, you know, last week maybe I broke my foot. And so now, you know, I don't have the wheelchair all the time or the crutches all the time, but then I'm very, you know, as a student in the university or a staff member, as the case may be, very appreciative. And so it's kind of like you kill two birds with one stone. You just make the space more accessible to all, and then it means we can be more productive. In addition to which, I mean, I think also it is a question of ownership. When you have ownership of processes and policies, you have better implementation. Mm-hmm. We see all the time, certainly at the international level, when countries are excluded, then you have problems in terms of implementation, because they're like, but no, I never agreed to this, or this is not something that I really feel strongly about. So I think those are all very, very valid points that you all have all made. So I want to switch gears slightly now, and let's think of the converse. So we've spoken about the benefits of inclusion and what it is about. But within, or when we think about Barbadian society within the Eastern Caribbean, to the extent that you all are familiar with the wider Eastern Caribbean, what would you say are the areas of exclusion? What are the areas that we need to be thinking about and working on? What are the problem areas concretely that we need to be reflecting on and trying to be more inclusive about, and why? And I'll start with you again, Carrie Ann.
How long do we have? What are still the pockets of exclusion? I have to say, unfortunately, from the community that I serve most often, pockets of inclusion aren't small pockets. They're very deep and big pockets. Employment for persons with disabilities within the Caribbean region stands at 90%. Now, people will say, but everybody with a disability can't work. No, but that 90% are the employable persons with disabilities. Enough has not been done in this area to be more inclusive. You say that we have the Anti-Discrimination and Employment Rights Act in Barbados, and that is true, and that is an excellent thing. But we still need to have disability sensitivity training for employers, for staff members, for colleagues, for persons with disabilities themselves. That's one area. Education remains a challenge. We think, right, look over here, we've got Carrie Ann Eiffel, she's graduated from university. My best friend calls me the perpetual student because I'm always studying this or that. So yay, pat ourselves on the back, it's inclusive. It is not. There are still too many areas within the educational system. And I could go on and on. I call it healthier. There are pockets of exclusion in every facet of everyday life. And it comes down to one simple thing. People are ignorant of what we need, of what can be achieved, of the opportunities. Governments regionally, because this is not something located in Barbados. Governments on a whole need to promote more standards and more opportunities. They have to lead by example, and they also have to lead by encouraging the private sector, the third sector, all of the other agencies, the entrepreneurial endeavors, all of those things, to embrace persons with disabilities, to recognize that persons with disabilities haven't had all the opportunities that others have had. When you put out ads, when you have discussions, disaster risk reduction, we live in a vulnerable part of the world. And every year it seems as though the process is getting longer. When I was young, I learned one nursery rhyme this year. I heard that there's an old mariner's tale. I said, well, you didn't have those verses when I was young, so it can't be that old. Anyway. But in May of this year, May of every year, we become extremely vulnerable to the vagaries of Mother Nature, or whatever you want to attribute the storms and hurricanes to. But has enough been done to make sure that the vulnerable sectors of our community are taken into consideration, that the information is flowing out to them? And speaking of information, another area in which we remain exclusive is in the area of the digital process. Digital information is out there. Do you know that there is only one reliable regional news source that I can access for Barbadian news? Only one. The others, I almost have to stand on my head to access the information accurately. So access to digital information, access to the financial sector, those are among some of the areas where exclusion still reigns.
Okay, I'll go to Michael this time at the very end. So Michael, how about you? If you had to highlight some of the key areas where you think we need to focus in terms of the opposite of inclusion, the problems of exclusion within our society, what would you say those would be?
Oof. Well, I'm gonna pass this on while I have a think.
Okay,
This,
no
if that's
problem.
all right.
Over to you, Marilyn.
Okay, thanks. Exclusion. And I'm so happy that Minister Jordan and Ms. Hope Greenwich, that they're here. We do not have in this country a national retirement age. Fact. Yet, persons are forced to leave the workforce at age 60 or 65. And that is something that quite a few, most people are not, it's not that they're not ready, and from a financial perspective, they still have so much more to give. And as I said, because there's no national retirement age, yet you must leave. No office provision at 60 in some companies, but the majority at 65, you must go. So when they go, they're taking a whole reservoir of knowledge with them as well. Again, from a job-seeking perspective, and I see my CEO, Dr. Jilks is here, and then certain other HR professionals, the worst thing you could do in an application is put your age.
No, that's the
worst
second
thing-
worst thing. Put disability and you will see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. The worst thing you can do is on an application is to place your age. Once you put your age and you 50 this, even late 40s, man, listen, you get bypass. You understand? On account of your age. And there's some people say, oh no, that doesn't happen. But it does, right? It does. And another area which we are also concerned about is ageism. It has become so commonplace. It is very rarely challenged. You know, like just now, he said, it's not a matter of all, it's just that I didn't remember. Because very often somebody always attributes something to age. So, you know, you get up, a common one, and I'm not going to be long, is, you know, you see people have parties, over the hill party. What's an over the hill party when you're on top of the hill? You know, I don't go to no over the hill party. I'm on top of the hill. And then you hear people say things like, oh, I was late, you know, you're old, and no, you're late because you're accustomed being late. It has nothing to do with age. And quite often, we too hold on to it. So whenever I find myself slipping in that mold, I snap out very, very quickly. For those ladies in the audience, you know, we don't have, what do you call them now? Hot flashes. We have power surges. You know, you have to claim your space and think positively. And whenever you experience any cases of ageism, and it's usually done with a smile, very easily. You know, somebody will tell you, man, I told you this before. It's just that you get older, you don't remember. But they might not have said it. So let us stop using age as a barrier, because age is just. Age is just. Age is just a number.
All right, Michael, you want to jump in there?
Yes, sorry, I do. I remember what I wanted to highlight around exclusion is the capturing of data about, you know, certain subpopulations. I remember that the Being LGBTI in the Caribbean project here was trying to collect data on intersex persons, but they really couldn't find anything because they wanted to find out what were the gaps, what were the needs of this community that, you know, we don't hear much about. And you know, if persons are born intersex, they're assigned, you know, male or female at birth. It's not captured that they have, you know, this ambiguity within them. So then how do you serve, or how do you include a population that's essentially excluded because you're not collecting the data on them? And then even with, you know, the community sexual orientation or gender identity, and, you know, you're not capturing that information. In terms of excluding information, we hear that we've done studies, and we hear from doctors who want to protect their LGBT clients that they leave out specific information in their notes just because they want to protect the client from, you know, prying eyes within the institutions, which is obviously another issue of confidentiality. But you know, how then can this person receive appropriate care if there's exclusion in their notes around certain issues? Because, you know, if that doctor changes, especially from a public site, and the new doctor comes in, they don't have the full story on how to protect or how to serve or treat this individual. So, you know, there is a level of how exclusion, we're not just talking policies, but exclusion on collecting data or information and being able to identify who is out there and who needs to be protected is also a big issue.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think it's two sort of important points that have struck me from the different responses that you all have given is sort of coming back to this idea that, exclusion is discrimination. And that's why we have to understand it in that context, as we think about human rights. When we exclude, we're discriminating against. And then sort of picking up on your point, Marilyn, where you were talking about even sometimes people do it to themselves in terms of ageism, the point that we sometimes have implicit bias. We have unconscious bias that we are not necessarily aware of, and you have to be so careful and always interrogating how you are interacting with persons and what you are putting out there, because sometimes the assumption is, oh, I'm a very open person, I don't, and then you think, oh my goodness, no, that wasn't sort of an inappropriate assumption that I made, and it sort of speaks to sort of implicit bias. And I was saying to Juana when we were speaking that Justice Jacqueline Cornelius has spoken about it in the context of the gender training that they do with the judiciary, and that the assumption always is that the females get it. And it's not always the case. Sometimes the biggest problems are with females in the context of dealing with issues of gender equality. So it just goes to highlight, as I said, the importance of being sensitive to implicit bias when we attempt to be open and try to address these issues of inclusiveness, because sometimes in trying to do that, we may actually do more harm than good because we haven't sufficiently interrogated ourselves as to what implicit biases we may have. I want to shift gears slightly now again and speak to the question of intersectionality. Juana and the resident coordinator spoke about the More Than campaign that the office here has launched as part of the work leading up to the climax of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this idea that we're more than any one thing, and it is important not to stereotype persons or things. And so I wanted to ask you about your views on intersectionality and its importance in terms of allowing us to be effective in terms of our efforts to be more inclusive societies. And I'll start with Michael this time at the other end.
Thank you very much. No, I think intersectionality is very important because I think that LGBTQ people...
I'm sorry, Michael. Maybe let's start off. What do you understand intersectionality to be about? And then why is it
Thank
important?
you. Well, for me, intersectionality is basically about, I guess, combining efforts between, groups, be them marginalized or, otherwise, because again, sometimes you find two groups have similar interests, or not just similar interests, but as I spoke earlier, similar challenges that they're facing. So intersectionality is really about the integration or the combination of those issues and working together to combat them. So for me, when there are gender issues, obviously that's very much tied to LGBT issues. Gender-based violence, people don't think that gender-based violence happens within same-sex couples, but there's that patriarchal dynamic that we've developed as society, and so there's always this power. There can be power struggles within same-sex relations, and that's something that needs to be looked at and needs to be combated with the movement against gender-based violence. Again, with climate change, and obviously, unfortunately, our other panelist isn't here, but, climate change impacts all marginalized groups because there might be, because they're already at risk in general, there's a heightened risk of being impacted or being excluded from the efforts, the relief efforts, right? So there's a lot that can be done. I think intersectionality is a very important tool for persons in terms of advocating for their rights. So yeah.
Okay, Marlon?
Yeah, like Michael, I'm thinking intersectionality of merging, gelling, because you can't, the elderly, we don't live in a specific sector of the society. We are everywhere. You have elderly persons who would be in the LGBT group, you have elderly persons who would be in the differently able group, so they are everywhere. So we have to recognize that we are indeed part of a whole. And Michael, you mentioned climate change as well. And we, as you said, you can't work in isolation. So we can't just stay in a corner and say we're just doing this for the elderly. But when we look at climate change as well, the seniors, I don't use the word elderly, I use seniors. Seniors are more impacted in times of climate change. And I can recall the situation, we saw it on WhatsApp and everything, when there was the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent, when this old man living, I think it was a son and a girlfriend, they were living at him, and the order was given to evacuate the area in the red zone, and he thought that he was wheelchair bound, so he thought they were going to come and get him, so they would all leave together. They left him. So in times of disaster, seniors feel it most. In the areas of abuse, you spoke about abuse, elders experience abuse. So you have to recognize that whatever you're doing, that it would impact the entire society, and that you have to be well-trained, well-versed, so that you can spread your wings, that at the end of the day, whatever is done for the seniors in the society, we've taken into consideration all aspects of the society, because we are part of the whole.
Yeah. And Carrie Ann?
Intersectionality for me is more than those things, though. It is that persons in all sectors of community, we have areas where our lives do just what the name suggests, intersects. Persons living with disabilities, there are persons within our community who are members of the LGBTQ community. But the stigma is so high that you don't want people to, wait, you're blind and you're going to go and do that too? Kind of attitude is what we run into. Well, in fact, you don't even have to go that far sometimes. As a blind woman, I'm not expected. My mother nearly had a heart attack the first time she saw a man kiss me. I was like, Mommy, you do know I'm in my 30s, right? But she had this image that I was still her little blind girl. And it was not acceptable for her. And that is how most society look on us. So when it comes to information on our sexual reproductive rights, that information isn't given. It isn't made accessible. When you're talking about intersectionality, it is about making sure that the information that comes out of BARP is made available and accessible to all sectors of the community. That when Michael develops a plan within Equals, that Equals recognizes that when they're putting on marches, town hall meetings, or any other activity, that they must engage sign language interpreters, that they need to produce their documents in easy read format. It means that when the Barbados Council for the Disabled and other members of the disabled community, that when we have activities, that we recognize that there will be members of other segments of the community that will be and must be included and represented. That is what intersectionality is for me. Not just saying that that we must work together. It's not just about working together. It is recognizing that we are not just one thing. I've heard too many persons who are seniors say, oh, no, I'm disabled, I just got a bad foot, the only here, so, No, that is a disability. If you can't climb stairs, if you can't wear 5-inch heels like you used to, that is a disability, right? When an LGBTQ person tests positive for diabetes, welcome to the club. You're a person with a disability now too, right? Age and disability. If you live long enough, you'll be a senior. And if you live long enough, You're going to be one of us too. All right? So it happens. And so what we need to do that work in this sector, we need to recognize that these things do happen and start working together. Years ago, there was a lot more adverse reactions when we tried to work with other community, minority groups. You know, they felt that we're not gonna do this. I remember one time there was one of the service clubs in Barbados started an initiative to benefit children with a variety of needs. And I actually heard one of the attendants at the opening ceremony say, people always give in to the children from, I won't say which group it was. Them don't need to be here. We need the money more than them. There's no such thing. Any one of us who serves a community that is underprivileged, that is challenged in one way or the other, has a need and has a right to access it. We all have those same human rights. And we need individual focuses. You see, one challenge I had with what Marilyn said is, Marilyn said age is just a number. I've been told that I make living with blindness look easy. It's not about living, it's not about making it look easy. I live. And that's all we need to do. We need to live. But in order for me to live successfully, I need, Michael needs, Marilyn needs, Ferguson needs, and all of us need that our specific area is taken into consideration. So when Juana sent out the concept note, she sent it electronically. And I never told her it wasn't accessible, because it's not. It's perfectly accessible because it's electronic. Marilyn might have wanted it a little bigger font. But I can teach her how to make it bigger herself if that's what she wants. And that is the intersectionality I'm talking about.
And that, I think that's a good note on which to move on to our final question, because I'm conscious of the time we have because we do want to leave some time for the audience to engage. And we've spoken about areas of need in terms of exclusion, and also into the intersectionality discussion, as well as raised also some areas of need in terms of systems that need to be put in place to ensure that we address the issues in a more complete way. And so I wanted to, in a sense, bring our conversation to a close by us reflecting on what we need to do to move forward. And so my question is twofold in a sense. Who is responsible? It's a linked question. Who is responsible for creating an inclusive society? And what role specifically because we always talk about government, and I'm sure we're going to say something about government, and I know the minister is here, so we're going to make sure to say something about what the government needs to do. And of course, we know with human rights is respect, fulfill, protect. And those are obligations that are directed towards governments. But also, so who has to create? We understand government, and you can speak to maybe where you see, them needing to act most decisively. But then more specifically now, drilling down, what, if any, is the individual's role? What role do we, outside of government, agencies, government groups, individuals, have to play, if any, in your estimation, in terms of creating this inclusive, equitable, human rights-based society that we're talking about? And I'll start off with Carrie-Ann.
Start with me, because that way she gets to shut me up quickest, right?
Not at all, not at all.
Whose responsibility is it? It's all of our responsibility. And I will say that. For the last 6 months, I have been part of the Constitutional Reform Commission. And because of that, we've been, all of us commissioners, we've been doing a lot of research in a variety of areas. And a concept that I encountered was horizontal application of the Constitution. And what does that mean? Horizontal application means all of us think a constitution binds our government, which it does, to certain responsibilities and to recognition of certain rights within our Constitution, and that the government must ensure that those rights are applied. Horizontal application means that not only the government has a responsibility, that private sector can also be taken to task, right, for not fulfilling their obligations. And I would like to broaden the concept of horizontal application to say that that needs to apply in all areas and sectors of the community. It's not just about what your constitution says or what the laws of the land says. It comes right back down to what the individual's rights are. And all of us have the responsibility, notice I didn't say the right, the responsibility to become fully educated on what our rights are. And in knowing what our rights are, we will better understand what our responsibilities are to others. And in understanding those things, then we will begin to get to the point of inclusion. Because my grandmother always used to tell me, what you don't want for yourself, you do not give to others. And if I know that I want to be taken seriously when I walk into a room, I cannot be dismissive of others. If I know that I want, when I come to an activity, that my needs have been taken into consideration, that accessible considerations have been put in place, that my perspective is given equal weight to others, then I must also do so when I am in the privilege of hosting, of coordinating. So for me, it's a very simple answer to your question. Who's responsible for inclusion? Everybody.
Marilyn?
Okay, just like Carrie. Who's responsible? I am. We are responsible for making sure that the message is transported. We have to continuously heighten the awareness around the issues that affect seniors. And we also have to be, as Carrie said, if the best form of advertisement is you. Very often, well, I know in the Barbadian setting, you see a carpenter, his house always needs fixing. But in today's world, very rarely do you see a nail tech with her nails not properly done. So the best form of advertising is you. You have to live it. You have to own it. And when you walk into space with confidence. We also have to recognize the importance of advocacy and select your advocates correctly. Don't just select an advocate because, or influencer because you figure you like how they look or whatever. Select people who have the conviction because they can help you to transport that message. But in conclusion, I am responsible. I am responsible for transmitting the message of the rights and the privileges, because there are privileges too, of being elderly in the elderly community. I am responsible for selecting and being an advocate for elderly in the community as well. So, yes, people would want to say government, but I want to say we are first, because what we do, people would then decide if they'll take us serious or not, right? So I am responsible.
And Michael? Who's responsible for creating this inclusive society?
Well, I'm just going to, back up what everyone has said. We've said that government has a level of responsibility. Yes, they put the policies in place, but of course some policies have gaps, and some people might be able to get through those gaps. For example, with the Employment Act, yes, if they don't update their policies, that they'll be fined. But who makes sure that when they've implemented those policies, they're following those policies? Who makes sure that they're doing the trainings that are necessary around inclusion and learning about who they want to include or who they're supposed to include? That then lies on us to hold people accountable for that, and make sure that we understand our rights and how to advocate for our rights and what the procedures are, because there are ways that, that we can still advocate and hold the private sector responsible. I do agree that, we are the best advocates for ourselves, can be the best advocates, because I believe visibility in itself, just being visible, is a very strong form of advocacy. I see a lot of persons, or a lot of persons just tell me, oh, I don't know a lot of LGBT people, but I think you're really cool. But it's just like, you do know LGBT people. You don't know that they are LGBT. And you'll find that, those friends that might be LGBT that you don't know about, they'll be no different if they come out to you. But, you have to present yourself as well, that you're open to being inclusive. So it also goes to, I guess, those who are not a part of marginalized groups to express their openness and willingness to learn and understand those who they are different from, or who they share the space with. And so people just feel uncomfortable because they don't know, they don't have conversations, they don't know how to engage. But it's the age of technology and age of information, right? So you can start somewhere. So it's all of us, ourselves, and all of you. Yes.
Okay, thanks. And I think one element that I'll throw out there, which kind of is representative of all of you who are here on the panel, is civil society generally. I think civil society plays a really important role as a partner to government and as an agent of holding government's feet to the fire and holding them accountable, sort of keeping the pressure on them to do what they say they're going to do and to do it in the correct way and to be inclusive and have the policies developed in the way that it needs to. So at this point, I think we will draw the formal part of the panel discussion to a close. I see Wana coming. I don't know if we have any questions online.
Yes, we have one question online, if I may pose it. It's on the issue of mental health that has not been brought up as much, and how sometimes it is forgotten and stigmatized as a form of disability within different pockets of society. Anyone would like to comment on mental health? This is a question from Grenada, from Sorana Mitchell.
I'll say to this, mental health issues are under-discussed in the Caribbean, and that is a fact. It is not it's stigmatized as a disability. It is one of the 5 categories recognized under the UN system as a disability. But too often, persons who live with psychosocial considerations, they are stigmatized because people don't understand. They think violence, they think all kinds of things, and they don't want to know about it. So they step away from it. But these last 2 years have taught us that even those who felt that they were not prone, not going to experience mental health considerations, it's not what you think it is all the time. It is, one friend said to me last week, her next door neighbor said, when I come home, I have nobody to talk to. And she almost went, because she could not leave her space. There are only so many online interactions you can have. And if nothing else we should have taken away from these last 2 years is how precious and vulnerable our mental health is, and why we must be more inclusive of persons who live with mental health challenges, because it is extremely, extremely easy to fall into, to develop, to experience whatever catchphrase is hot. It is very easy to be a part of that society, because it's not just, they're not out there, we're all in here together. And so while we didn't speak about it specifically this afternoon, it is another one of those areas of intersectionality that must be openly discussed and is stigma removed?
Yes, I wanted to add something. So I function as policy advisor with Healthy Caribbean Coalition, which is a regional CSO, alliance of CSOs dealing with NCD prevention and control. And of course, mental health is an NCD. And I wanted to just endorse what Carrie Ann was saying, but also to point out that in the context of COVID, what we've seen in particular is there's a real crisis within our youth. I heard the minister of responsible for youth speaking a few days ago about Barbados really trying to come to grips with how much young people are struggling with mental health issues. And it doesn't have to be mental health at the level of, you have a psychosis or, you're bipolar or whatever it is. It can be just severe depression, sense of isolation, etc. And certainly we saw it, and sometimes, the smallest, first let me mention that Healthy Caribbean Youth have issued a call to action on mental health, particularly for the youth, recognizing that this is an overlooked area and youth, their struggle in this space has not got much attention. And so I encourage you to have a look at the call to action and the work that they're doing in that space. But also during COVID, as I said, I'm a lecturer at UE, and I remember in one of my classes, I just, you pick up all of these little tips, little things to do, and you don't always think that will make that much of a difference, right? But so it's this one little slide. I'm teaching online, and, they said just check in with the class. Just check in and see who's struggling, who's not struggling, who's doing okay today. And so I had this slide with these little smiley faces, one is smiling, I'm great, one, and you're going down the different moods. And I didn't do it every class, but I was astonished at how many students reached out to me and said they so much appreciated me doing that. We just took 5 minutes at the start of the class, and I'd say to them, if you're really struggling and you don't want to share publicly, that's fine. You can message me privately, or, I can direct you to the resources we have at UE to assist you. But so many of them, when, normally they think you're wasting their time unless you're dealing with something that's directly related to the exam. So many of them said, they were really appreciative of it. So I say that to say that sometimes it doesn't even take much in terms of the type of responses that you need to make an impact in terms of the mental health. Yeah? Any more questions?
Sorry, I just want to add to the issue of mental health, that inclusion or even exclusion, we talked about how we developed, mental health is developed as well based on the stresses and things that you experience. And being excluded or being discriminated against can result in the development of some of these things. So, in addressing inclusion, we can address, as I said, we can address other issues as well, and mental health is definitely one of them.
For sure.
Yeah, picking up there as well with mental health issues. During COVID, we at BAR, we did wellness checks. We called our members. We just had a list, and we would call some members to find out how they were coping. But the majority of our members experienced loneliness, and Barbados is a Christian society, and you will recall that the church doors were closed. And in hurricanes, in any time of calamity in this country, you could always go to the church. So when the church's doors were closed, a lot of our seniors felt abandoned. And they even thought that the world was coming to an end because they wanted to go to the church. That was their point of solace. And the church, they felt as if the church had turned its back on them because the church's doors were closed. And so it took a while to help to reshape their thinking and get them into the online churches and stuff like that. So much that they're going to church now again, and they're still sitting with the tablets because they want to be online and at church as well. But we also conducted Zoom classes for quite a few of our seniors because we view the digital space as important, and the digital space is here to stay. So we do prepare our seniors for the world of the digital spaces.
Okay, and so with that, I'm going to bring this part of the proceedings to a close. I want to thank more sincerely our panelists. I think we had a rich and very fruitful discussion. I leave you with where we started. Don't invite me to the party, but not to dance. And also that we have to make conscious decisions to be inclusive. And with that, I close off. I thank Juana once again for the invitation to moderate this panel, and I close off this part of the proceeding.
Thank you very much. You can stay. You can stay. This is going to take 2 minutes. Thank you very much to our panelists. I am very sorry with Ferguson, who had some digital problems and couldn't stay with us. And this is one of the exclusion issues that we face, especially in a regional office like ours. We do our best. We tried all kinds of things, and he couldn't be with us all the time. But thank you very much. Very interesting conversation, discussion, many food for thought, I hope. We are just going to close this celebration. I call it a celebration of human rights, with showing you a piece of art that has been mentioned, and a lot of people are curious to see what we're talking about. It is the inspiration for the campaign more than, it's the inspiration behind the face, and it was done by a young female artist, a young woman that I know is here but doesn't want to speak. Her name is Alicia Smith. She has been wonderful, and I hope you would like it. It's very modern. It's a piece that we will put in the walls of the UN house, and it's about the issue of inclusion. And it will continue to be our inspiration for this campaign. So, can I do the honors? I am excited about this. So I will do the honors. And this is the piece on inclusion. And it's very modern for colleagues. I want to mention that this is a face of a woman, or what many of us believe is a woman, looking to the horizon. But within the face, there are many different persons and people of different abilities, different ages, different races, different interests, different professions being shown together, and most of them are very happy. We also had asked for something that will show that inclusion is something that makes us all richer, that makes us all better as a society and as a community. And we have heard many very good reasons why. I invite you to come closer and have a look. Sorry. Oh, yes, please. If you would like to come for a picture with the artist. I don't know if she doesn't want to speak, but she might want to come. Yes, it's a wonderful piece. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you very much, everyone, for having joined us, for the patience with the time, with the digital issues. There is a cocktail now that is very well deserved by everyone, and we're all hoping to be able to speak to the panelists while we are at the cocktail. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all. Thank you.